So you want to make gemstones into gems. Let me show you the different ways how. If you're just like I was, you want to jump right in. But just like a married couple trying to figure out what's for supper, it's not that simple. There's a few techniques on how to get into this. First, we need to figure out what way you'd like to get into lapidary. There's tumbling, carving, cabochon cutting, and faceting. So let's start with an easy way of people getting into lapidary, which is transforming rock or stone into gemstones, art, things like that. And that way is tumbling. Tumbling is having a barrel on something filmed with a sanding medium and putting the rocks in the barrel as well. And what you're going to do is you're going to put it on like some wheels with a motor, and these wheels will turn. And as it's turning, that sanding media will sand down the stone and polish it up as well. Tumbling's an easy way to get into it and an inexpensive way to get into it. You can just grab rocks out of the yard if you want to and tumble them, or you can order some rough off of Amazon and tumble them as well. The cons to tumbling is that it takes quite a while, and it's not very hands-on. So you're not really doing much but letting them tumble. When I say it takes a while, from my understanding, people usually take at least 3 weeks to tumble, but it could be more, less. I'm not really into tumbling, so I can't give you really firsthand experience on it. So while this is usually people's first steps into their lapidary journey, it's usually not their last. People do tend to move on from tumbling. Now, it doesn't mean they give it up, but from what I've talked to people, they usually say this is where they start and they move on to something different. So let's talk about another form of lapidary. The second form is carving. Carving is when somebody has like a hand tool or a power tool, and they usually sand down the stone by hand, and usually they make it into their desired shape or form. And this could be a very hands-on, but some also say a very tedious form of lapidary. But I've heard a lot of people say it's pretty fun. Now, I have some experience, but not a lot of experience in that. People who prefer this art usually create amazing things like sculptures or animals. I've even seen people attempt people like the Buddhas and stuff like that. Um, it does tend to be less pricey, but a little more frustrating. You can, if you don't know what you're doing, you can really mess up equipment very easily doing this. While it can be less expensive, it can be more frustrating to get into, just from the tendency to mess things up and take a long time doing something. So it kind of hits you a little harder from what I've taught the people doing these sculptures and things like that. Generally speaking, it can be a little more frustrating. From what I've taught the people who do the carving for a living, that once you get good at it, it really surprises you what you can actually make with it. So if this form of lapidary interests you, I would say be prepared, be patient, but you can really do some amazing things with it. Now, this next form I'm really familiar with is cutting cabochons. This is usually done on a flat lap or a cab machine. It's very hands-on and it is pricey, but it is very messy as well. While it can be frustrating as well to learn how to cut cabs if you're a perfectionist like I am, it can also be very relaxing and a confident booster as well once you get better at it. It is, though, expensive to get into as well. The equipment costing quite a lot. I think my first flat lab was about $600 and the Cab King was about 12. So it can be quite expensive. Once you get into making it, things like I have here, we got some cabochons right here that's still on the dock, some 4-dye, and even some knives. And hopefully in the future on the channel, we'll be doing things like wristwatches and clocks, murals. Lord, I'm going to try some pins. I mean, all kinds of things. You can really express a lot of creativity with cabochon cutting and many other things I haven't even thought of. So, you know, people do crazy things all the time with cabochon cutting. I'd say it's a very time-consuming hobby as well. But once you get into it and once you get good at it, it's really, it really does become somewhat addicting. The last but not least form is faceting. It's usually done with a faceting machine that has a mast, but some still do jam peg faceting, as well as hand faceting. Now, faceting is hands-on and extremely expensive. The reason that why these machines are extremely expensive is because you have to be really precise with it. Being fractions of a millimeter off can ruin your entire stone by the time you're done. Faceting is usually the way that you see these high-end stones cut, usually cut for like high-end jewelers, you know, your sapphires, your rubies, your emeralds, tanzanites, things like that. That's usually going to be cut with a faceting machine. This is very expensive to the point to where a new machine that is not cheap and unreliable will be multiple thousands of dollars. Faceting is also very numbers based to the point to where it's almost mathematical, but it's also very hands-on too. So you have to look and see where your meet points are and things like that. From talking to faceters, it is hard to learn, and from just hearing what they say, it actually sounds like one of the hardest forms of lapidary to learn. But once you learn it, you get this huge sense of accomplishment that is really unmatched from my experience in talking to people, to the point to where it becomes addicting. So faceting, while more expensive, while very time consuming, it is, from what I hear, the most addicting form of lapidary, but it can be also quite draining as well. I hope this gave you some insight on the path that you may want to take into getting into lapidary. And let us know what form you'd like to see us do a deep dive into next. We do all kinds of lapidary content. And if this video helped you out at all, let us know in the comments below. And also make sure to like, share, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.